5,000 people on a rock the size of a stadium. Today, 0. This is Hashima, a lump of rock in the sea off Nagasaki, Japan. It is barely 480 meters long, smaller than most city parks. And in 1959, this was the most crowded place that has ever existed anywhere on Earth. 5,259 people were packed onto 16 acres of stone. In the island's residential district, the density reached 139,100 people per square kilometer, the highest figure ever recorded in human history. That is roughly 9 times more crowded than modern Manhattan. Families were stacked into concrete towers on an island barely bigger than a battleship. And then, in a matter of weeks, every single one of them left. Today, not one person lives here. This is how the most crowded island on Earth became a ghost town. So how does the most densely populated place in human history end up completely abandoned? The easy answer is that the coal ran out. That answer is wrong. The mine still held coal when the last resident stepped onto the ferry. The real reasons are stranger. Hashima was never really a town. It was a machine for pulling coal out from under the seabed, and people were the fuel it needed on site. When the world switched the energy it ran on, the entire reason for the island vanished in a single season. Here is the map of exactly how that happened. Start with what Hashima actually was, because it explains everything that follows. About 15 kilometers off the coast of Nagasaki, a coal seam runs deep beneath the seafloor. In 1890, the industrial giant Mitsubishi bought the tiny reef that sat above it and turned the whole rock into a single undersea mine. From 1891 to 1974, that mine pulled roughly 15.7 million tons of coal up from shafts that ran hundreds of meters below the waves. To reach that coal, the miners had to live directly on top of it. There was no ferry commute from the mainland in the early days, and the sea was often too rough to cross. So Mitsubishi built an entire town on a stone that measures just 6.3 hectares, about 16 acres. To stop the ocean from washing it away, they wrapped the island in a towering concrete seawall, and it was that gray wall, ringing a bristle of tall buildings, that gave Hashima its nickname. From a distance, it looked exactly like a warship riding at anchor, so people called it Gunkanjima, Battleship Island. Every apartment, every shop, the school, the hospital, the cinema, the bathhouse, all of it was owned and run by the company. Hashima was not a place that grew. It was a place that was built, top to bottom, for one job. Now the number that makes Hashima famous. In 1959, the island hit its peak of 5,259 residents. Spread that across the whole 6.3 hectare rock, and you get about 83,600 people per square kilometer. But nobody lived on the mine works or the seawall. So in the residential district, the real density climbed to 139,100 people per square kilometer, or about 216,000 people per square mile. To this day, it is the highest population density ever recorded anywhere on the planet. Picture what that meant day to day. There was no ground to spread onto, so the town went straight up. Hashima held around 30 buildings, and back in 1916, Mitsubishi built Japan's first large reinforced concrete apartment block right here, a 7-story tower for miners. More towers followed until the skyline was a wall of concrete separated by canyons barely wide enough to pass through. Apartments were tiny, often a single room per family, with shared toilets and shared kitchens down the hall. There was no room for parks or gardens at street level, so residents planted vegetables on the rooftops just to see something green. Elevators were rare, so life was measured in staircases. At its peak, the density on Hashima was more than 5 times that of central Tokyo. It was, quite literally, the most crowded ground human beings have ever stood on. Here is the part people get wrong. That record density was not a sign that Hashima was a wildly popular place to live. It was a symptom of the coal and nothing else. Think about the trap Mitsubishi was in. The coal was under the sea, so the mine could only sit on this one small reef. You cannot move a mine shaft, and you cannot commute across open ocean during a typhoon. That meant thousands of workers and their families had to be housed within a few hundred meters of the pit head, on a rock you could walk across in 10 minutes. There was only one direction left to build, and that was up. Concrete was the only material that made sense, because wood burns and typhoons flatten it, while reinforced concrete could take both the storms and the salt. So the density everyone marvels at was really just arithmetic. Take a fixed and tiny piece of land, add a workforce that has to stay close to a single hole in the ground, and the population per square kilometer has nowhere to go but through the roof. Hashima was crowded for the exact same reason it was doomed. Its entire existence was bolted to one resource, in one spot, that the world was about to stop wanting. So why did it empty out, and why so violently fast? The answer came from thousands of miles away, in the oil fields of the Middle East. Through the 1960s, cheap petroleum swept across Japan and quietly killed coal. Oil was easier to ship, easier to burn, and simply cheaper, and one by one the coal mines of Japan began shutting their gates. Hashima had no second industry to fall back on. Remember, it was a single company running a single mine, and once that mine stopped paying, there was no reason for the island to exist at all. In January 1974, Mitsubishi officially closed the Hashima mine. And here is the brutal part. Because the company owned every apartment and every job, the moment it left, there was nothing to stay for. No landlord to rent from, no shop to run, no other employer on the rock. So the people did not drift away over decades the way most towns fade. They were gone in about 3 months. By the 20th of April, 1974, the last residents had boarded the ferry, and an island that had held more people per square meter than anywhere in history was completely, silently empty. The coal had not run out. The world had simply changed what it burned. For 35 years, Hashima was sealed off and left entirely to the weather. That turned out to be the most dramatic thing that could happen to it. With no one to make repairs, the East China Sea went to work. Typhoon after typhoon slammed the seawall and the exposed towers. Salt air ate into the concrete, and the reinforcing steel inside began to rust and swell until floors and staircases cracked apart. Windows are long gone, roofs have caved, and inside the old apartments you can still find furniture, bottles, and shoes left exactly where they were dropped in 1974. It became one of the most striking ruins on Earth, and the wider world took notice. Hashima appeared as a villain's lair in a James Bond film and drew ruined photographers from across the globe. In 2009, Japan finally opened a small, fenced viewing route to tourists, and in 2015 the island was listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, part of the sites of Japan's Meiji Industrial Revolution, though that listing remains contested because of the forced Korean and Chinese labor used here during the war. But safe access is limited because the buildings are genuinely collapsing. The most crowded island in history is slowly being ground back into the sea. So here is the real lesson of Hashima. Being crowded is not the same as being wanted. This was never the most crowded island because it was a paradise people fought to reach. It was the most crowded island because it was a coal machine that forced thousands of people onto one tiny rock and stacked them toward the sky. The density and the emptiness came from the exact same cause. Tie a whole town to a single resource in a single spot, and you have built something that lives or dies with that resource. When the world stopped burning coal and started burning oil, the reason for Hashima simply evaporated, and 5,000 people became zero in a single spring. And it stays empty for the plainest reason of all. There is nothing to come back to. No coal worth the cost of digging, no land to farm, no company that needs it, and a sea that grows a little more of the ruin every year. The most crowded place in the history of our species is now one of the emptiest, a battleship of gray concrete anchored off Nagasaki, sailing nowhere, with absolutely no one aboard. If you want to see another place the map forgot, the next file heads to southern Africa, where a wall of fog and sand keeps almost everyone out. That is why nobody lives on Namibia's 1,000-mile coast. Subscribe to No One Lives Here, and we will map the emptiest places on Earth together, 1 week at a time.